The massive ship drifted silently through the darkness of space, its hull covered in what appeared to be centuries of cosmic dust. Professor Reed pressed his face against the observation window of his research vessel, his four eyes widening with excitement. After 30 years of studying ancient spacecraft, he had never seen anything quite like this. "Captain, are you seeing this?" Reed called out, his antennae twitching with excitement. "There's not just one ship. There's an entire fleet." As their research vessel moved forward, more ships became visible in the darkness. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, arranged in perfect formation despite their apparent age. The ships were huge, easily dwarfing modern vessels, but their design seemed strangely basic. "How primitive," Captain Blue remarked, his scaled skin shifting colors to show his disappointment. "Look at those metal plates. They're not even using quantum shielding. These must be at least 50,000 years old." Reed ignored the captain's dismissive tone. Something about these ships didn't make sense. Their formation was too perfect for derelict vessels, and despite their age, the hull showed minimal damage from space debris. The initial scans came in, and the research team gathered in the main hall to discuss their findings. Representatives from 12 different species were present, each hoping to claim the discovery for their own civilization. "The metal composition is basic iron and steel," announced lead engineer Green, her crystal body reflecting the room's lights. "No advanced alloys, no biometal components. Whoever built these didn't even have basic metal printing technology." Laughter filled the room. These ships were supposed to be their big discovery. They looked like they would fall apart if someone sneezed on them. But Reed noticed something odd in the scans. The metal wasn't corroded, not even a little bit. Regular steel should have shown some signs of deterioration after so many thousands of years in space. "I want to go inside," Reed announced, silencing the room. Inside that junk heap, Captain Blue's scales turned a mocking shade of purple. "Why waste your time, Professor?" "Because," Reed said slowly, "these ships shouldn't exist. The metal is too well preserved. The formation is too perfect. And look at this." He pointed to a specific scan result. "There's still power flowing somewhere inside." That got their attention. Active power in a 50,000-year-old ship. Impossible. 3 hours later, Reed led a small team through the airlock of the largest vessel. Their magnetic boots clanked against the metal floor. Actual metal, not the composite materials used in modern ships. The corridors were huge, built for beings much larger than any of their species. "These markings," Reed muttered, studying the walls. "They're similar to early human writing systems." "Humans?" Engineer Green scoffed, her crystal form tingling with amusement. "They'd barely left their solar system 30 years ago. These ships are far too old." Reed wasn't so sure. He'd studied human history extensively, and something about these ships felt familiar. The practical design, the focus on durability over aesthetics, the oversized corridors. They reached what appeared to be the bridge. Ancient control panels lined the walls, filled with what looked like mechanical buttons and levers. More laughter from the team. They were using physical controls. Green chuckled. Not even basic neural interfaces. Reed approached one of the panels. Among the strange markings, he spotted something that made his heart stop. A small symbol, barely visible under the dust. He wiped it clean with his hand. There, printed clearly on the metal, was an image he had seen before in his studies of human history. An eagle clutching arrows and olive branches, with the letters USA beneath it. "Professor," one of his assistants called out. "Are you okay? You've gone quite pale." Reed stared at the symbol, his mind racing with implications. If he was right, everything they thought they knew about human history was wrong. But that was impossible, wasn't it? "Get me a secure line to the council," he said quietly. "And don't touch anything else. Not until we know exactly what we're dealing with." As his team continued to joke about the primitive design, Reed couldn't shake the feeling that they were all missing something obvious, something important. something that would change everything they thought they knew about humans and their place in the galaxy. The council chamber buzzed with laughter as Professor Reed finished his presentation. The holographic images of the ancient fleet floated in the center of the room, rotating slowly to show their basic design. You want us to spend resources studying these obsolete vessels? Council Leader White's voice boomed through the chamber. His crystalline body sparkled with amusement. They're clearly remnants of some failed civilization. Reed's antennae drooped slightly, but he stood firm. There's more to these ships than what we see. The power readings are probably from decaying reactor cores, interrupted another council member. Mark them as a navigation hazard, and let's move on to more important matters. The council quickly voted. The ancient fleet was declared worthless, just another space curiosity. Research funding denied. Case closed. But Reed couldn't let it go. Back on his research vessel, he sat in his private quarters, studying the scans for the 100th time. The human symbol he'd found kept drawing his attention. He needed help, someone who might understand human design better than he did. You wanted to see me, Professor. Tom Parker, his human research assistant, stood at the door. The young man was one of only 3 humans on the expedition, usually ignored by the rest of the crew. Yes, Tom. Come in. And please, call me Reed. The professor closed his door and activated his privacy field. I need your opinion on something. Unofficial. Tom's eyes widened as Reed showed him the scans and the symbol. That's impossible, he whispered. Those ships are thousands of years old. We only achieved faster than light travel 30 years ago. That's what everyone believes, Reed said. But what if we were wrong? They spent the next 6 hours analyzing the scans in secret. Tom's knowledge of human engineering opened Reed's eyes to details he'd missed. The primitive mechanical controls weren't primitive at all. They were redundancy systems. The thick metal hulls weren't just sturdy. They were layered with what looked like dormant nanomaterials. Look at this. Tom pointed to a scan of what they'd thought was an ancient computer. See these patterns? They're quantum circuits, disguised to look like mechanical calculators. This isn't primitive technology. It's advanced tech deliberately made to look old. Reed felt his heart racing. But why? Why would anyone build advanced chips and make them look primitive? To hide them, Tom said simply. Think about it. If you built the most advanced fleet in history, would you want everyone to know what it could do? Their secret investigation continued for days. They found more evidence. Weapon systems disguised as cargo holds, what appeared to be basic thrusters but contained patterns suggesting they were actually spacefold drives, and data systems that seemed to respond to human DNA. One evening, as they worked late in Reed's lab, Tom made another discovery. Professor Reed, look at this. The metal composition isn't just steel. There are microscopic machines inside it, billions of them. They're repairing the hull constantly. That's why there's no deterioration. Reed was about to respond when his door chimed. He quickly shut off their displays as Captain Blue entered. Still obsessing over those ancient ships, Professor? Blue's scales shifted to a patronizing shade of green. The council wants us to move on. We're leaving this sector tomorrow. After the captain left, Reed turned to Tom. We need more time. There's too much we don't know yet. Maybe that's the point, Tom said quietly. Maybe we're not supposed to know everything yet. But I'll tell you one thing. Those ships were built by humans, my people. And they're not dead or abandoned. They're waiting. Waiting for what? Tom looked at the scans again, at the eagle symbol that had started their investigation. I don't know, but all this effort to hide advanced technology behind a primitive facade, you don't do that unless you're planning for something. Something big. Reed felt a chill run through his body. He looked out his viewport at the ancient fleet, still floating silently in space. What were they really looking at? A remnant of the past, or a carefully planned preparation for the future? The next day, as their research vessel prepared to leave, Reed made a decision. He would stay behind, alone if necessary. Because now he was certain. These ships weren't just a scientific curiosity. They were a message, written in steel and hidden technology, waiting for the right moment to be understood. And he intended to be there when that moment came. Reed's small research pod drifted alongside the ancient fleet. 3 days had passed since the main expedition left, leaving him and Tom behind to conduct their foolish investigation. The pod wasn't comfortable, but it kept them alive and close to their discovery. "I think I found something," Tom called from his workstation. "These patterns in the hull, they're not random damage. They're access points." Reed floated over to look. His 4 eyes blinked rapidly as he studied the scans. "Access points for what?" "I don't know, but—" Tom stopped mid-sentence as his hand brushed against a seemingly solid part of their latest sample. A small section of the metal slid aside, revealing the hidden port. "That's new," Reed whispered, his antennae twitching with excitement. Tom stared at the port. It looked like nothing modern, yet somehow familiar. Without thinking, he reached out and placed his hand on it. The metal was warm. A soft hum filled their pod. On the ancient ship outside their viewport, lights began to flicker to life. First a few, then dozens, then hundreds. The massive vessel seemed to shiver, as if waking from a long sleep. "Tom, what did you do?" Reed's voice shook slightly. "I didn't. I just touched it." Tom pulled his hand back, but it was too late. The activation sequence had begun. Through their viewport, they watched in awe as the effect spread from ship to ship. The entire fleet was waking up. What had appeared as rust flaked away, revealing pristine metal underneath. Sections of the ships began to move, transforming from their basic shapes into something more complex. Their pod's communication system crackled to life. Genetic signature recognized. Human DNA detected. Beginning primary activation protocol. The voice was calm, almost friendly, but it carried an undeniable authority. Tom and Reed looked at each other in shock. "This is Admiral Stone of the Earth Defense Fleet," the voice continued. Date stamp, July 15, 2157. If this message is playing, the hibernation protocol has been successfully maintained, and human survivors have found us. 2157. Tom whispered, That's over 400 years ago." The message continued, "To whoever activated this system, the fleet is now yours to command. We built it to look primitive for a reason. Our long-range sensors detected something coming, something that made us realize humanity wasn't ready for a direct confrontation. So we prepared. We hid our best technology in plain sight and waited." Outside, the transformation continued. What had appeared as basic sensor arrays unveiled themselves as advanced scanning systems. Simple-looking gun ports revealed energy weapons far beyond current technology. The entire fleet was shedding its primitive disguise. "Professor," Tom said quietly, "I think I know why they hid all this. They weren't hiding it from us. They were hiding it from whatever they saw coming." Reed's reply was cut off by new alarms. Their pod sensors were detecting massive energy readings from the fleet. Each ship was now producing more power than a modern battlecruiser. "Final activation sequence commencing," Admiral Stone's voice announced. "Defense grid online. Quantum cores stabilizing. Nano repair systems at full capacity." A new message flashed across their screens. "War Arning. Long-range sensors detecting unknown entities approaching from Vector 7. Match with historical threat profile, 99.9%. Tom's face went pale. They knew. Somehow, they knew this was coming. They built this fleet and hid it, knowing that someday we'd need it. Reed watched as more systems came online, the ships that everyone had laughed at, that the Council had dismissed as worthless, were revealing themselves to be the most advanced vessels he'd ever seen. "Tom," he said slowly, "I think we need to contact the Council. They need to know what's coming." "And what is coming, Professor?" Reed looked at the sensor readings, at the massive unknown force approaching from deep space, and at the now transformed fleet that seemed built specifically to face it. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I think we're about to find out why your ancestors went to so much trouble to hide this fleet, and why they made sure it would be found at exactly this moment." The ancient ships, now fully awake, moved into battle formation. Whatever was coming, humanity's long-hidden guardians were ready to face it. The council chamber was no longer filled with laughter. On the main display, images showed the approaching alien fleet, the Dominion, as they called themselves. Their ships were massive, shaped like dark crystals that absorbed light rather than reflected it. "How many?" Council Leader White asked, his crystalline form dulled with worry. 10,000 ships at least, Reed reported from his small pod's communication link. "They're unlike anything we've ever seen. Their technology, it's beyond anything in known space." Behind him, the now awakened human fleet hung in space, its true form revealed. The supposedly primitive vessels now gleamed with advanced technology, their hull plates rippling with nanites that constantly repaired and improved them. The council chamber erupted in chaos as a transmission cut through all channels. A dark figure appeared on screen. The Dominion commander. Its form was hard to look at, seeming to shift and change constantly. "Lesser species," the commander's voice boomed. "Your time is over. We have watched your primitive attempts at civilization. We have seen your weaknesses. Surrender now, and your deaths will be quick." Tom stepped forward beside Reed in their pod. "They're what our ancestors saw coming," he whispered. "This is what the fleet was built for." The Dominion ships moved with impossible speed, surrounding several outer colonies. Their weapons fired, and entire planets went dark. Billions died in seconds. "By the stars," one council member whispered. "Their weapons, they're not just destroying the colonies. They're erasing them from existence." More Dominion ships appeared, their dark forms blotting out the stars. Modern defense fleets fired everything they had. Energy beams, plasma torpedoes, quantum warheads. Nothing even scratched the Dominion vessels. "We cannot fight this," Council Leader White said, his voice heavy. "Their technology is too advanced. We must surrender to save who we can." "No." Reed's voice was firm. "We have another option." He turned to Tom. "Show them." Tom placed his hand on the control panel again. The ancient human fleet moved forward, taking up position between the Dominion and the remaining colonies. What happened next made everyone watching gasp. The Dominion fired their erasure weapons, but this time, something was different. The beams hit the human ships and stopped. The supposedly primitive metal hulls absorbed the attacks like they were nothing. "Impossible." The Dominion commander's voice showed emotion for the first time. "Fear. Those ships, they can't be here. We saw the humans' technology level. They're primitive." Admiral Stone's voice echoed through all channels. "You saw what we wanted you to see. Humanity knew you were coming. We've been preparing for 400 years." The human ships began to move. What had looked like simple gun ports transformed into weapons never seen before. The supposedly basic engines pulsed with power that bent space itself. "Professor," Tom said quietly, "I think we should move our pod back." They watched as the human fleet engaged the Dominion. The advanced aliens fired their unstoppable weapons, but they stopped every time. The human ships, designed specifically to counter this threat, proved immune to everything the Dominion threw at them. "How?" Council Leader White demanded. "How did they know? How did they build this?" Reed watched the battle unfold, his 4 eyes wide with understanding. They saw this coming centuries ago. Instead of trying to advance their technology normally, they poured everything into developing countermeasures. They hid their true capabilities and waited, knowing the Dominion would eventually come. The Dominion ships began to retreat, their perfect formations breaking apart. Their unstoppable weapons had been stopped. Their advanced technology meant nothing against defenses designed specifically to counter them. "They're running," Tom said, a hint of pride in his voice. Humanity's plan worked. They spent centuries building the perfect counter to the Dominion's technology, and then hid it in plain sight. The council chamber was silent, watching as the supposedly primitive fleet drove back the unstoppable enemy. No one was laughing anymore at the ancient ships. Instead, they were thanking the stars that humanity had the foresight to build them. The battle was far from over, but for the first time since the Dominion appeared, there was hope. Tom stood at the main control center of the flagship, his hand pressed against the ancient console. Around him, the ship hummed with power that had been sleeping for centuries. Reed watched in fascination as streams of data flowed across the screens. "It's amazing," Tom said, his eyes scanning the information. "The ships aren't just responding to my DNA. They're teaching me how to use them." The knowledge flowed directly into his mind. What had seemed like simple mechanical controls were actually interfaces for systems far more advanced than anything in the modern galaxy. Every button, every lever had a hidden purpose. "They're not just weapons," Tom explained to Reed. "Each ship is a complete survival system. They can rebuild entire planets if needed. The fleet isn't just meant to fight the Dominion. It's meant to help rebuild afterward." Another wave of Dominion ships appeared at the edge of the system. Their crystal black hulls seemed to swallow nearby starlight. But this time, no one on the council transmission looked afraid. "Tell us what you're seeing, Tom," Council Leader White requested, his crystalline form glowing with interest rather than fear. "The fleet is showing me everything," Tom replied, his eyes half closed as he absorbed the information. "Those aren't really rust patches on the hulls. They're colonies of nanites disguised to look like corrosion. The mechanical gears inside the ships, they're actually quantum probability engines made to look primitive." Reed's antennae twitched as he watched the systems come alive. But why make them look so basic? Why hide such advanced technology? Admiral Stone's hologram appeared beside them. "Because we knew the Dominion would be watching. They've done this before, waiting until a civilization reaches a certain technology level, then striking. So we hid our true progress. We made them think we were centuries behind where we actually were." On the screens, they watched as the Dominion fleet approached. Their weapons, the ones that had erased entire planets, powered up again. "They still think their weapons will work," Tom said, a small smile forming on his face. "They don't understand what they're really fighting." The supposedly primitive hull of their ship rippled. What had looked like patches of rust flowed like liquid metal, forming new patterns. The simple metal plates transformed, revealing layer after layer of technology that had been hidden beneath the disguise. "By the stars," Reed whispered, "the entire fleet is a deception. Every primitive feature is actually something advanced in disguise." The Dominion ships fired. Their erasure beams struck the human fleet, and were not just blocked, but absorbed. The energy flowed through the nanite systems, making the ships stronger. "Impossible." The Dominion commander's voice boomed across all channels. "These readings, these ships, they're more advanced than our own." "Of course they are," Admiral Stone's hologram replied calmly. "We had centuries to prepare. While you watched our public technology level, our real advancement never stopped. We built these ships with one purpose: to be ready when you came." Tom's hands moved across the controls, now understanding their true purpose. What had seemed like simple targeting systems revealed themselves to be complex neural interfaces. Basic radar arrays transformed into reality-bending sensors that could track ships through multiple dimensions. "Professor," Tom called out, "you might want to record this. I don't think anyone's going to laugh at human technology anymore." The fleet moved as one, its true power finally unleashed. The mechanical gears that had drawn mockery now powered weapons that could reshape space itself. The thick metal halls housed computers that could outthink any AI in known space. Every feature that had been laughed at, every primitive design choice, revealed itself as part of humanity's grandest deception. They had hidden their true power in plain sight, waiting for this exact moment. The Dominion ships began to fall back again, but this time, The human fleet didn't let them escape. The time for hiding was over. Now, it was time to show the galaxy exactly what humanity could do. And no one was laughing anymore. The battle spread across 3 star systems. The Dominion's dark ships fled, but everywhere they turned, they found the human fleet waiting. What had seemed like clumsy, oversized engines were actually devices that could bend space itself, letting the ancient ships appear anywhere they wanted. "They're trying to regroup near the Centauri cluster," Tom reported from his position at the control center. His mind was now fully linked with the fleet's systems, understanding technologies that had been hidden for centuries. Reed watched in amazement as the battle unfolded. The Dominion ships fired their planet-killer weapons in desperation, but each shot was caught and absorbed by the human fleet's strange metal hulls. "Look at this," Tom said, pointing to a display. "Those big, clunky missile tubes everyone laughed at. They're not missile launchers at all." As if on cue, the tubes on thousands of human ships opened. Instead of primitive rockets, they released swarms of golden lights. Each light was a microscopic robot, built from technology centuries ahead of anything in the modern galaxy. "Nanite swarms," Reed whispered, his 4 eyes wide with wonder. Disguised as simple missile tubes, the swarms surrounded the Dominion ships. The dark crystal hulls that had seemed indestructible began to change color, then crack. The nanites were taking them apart piece by piece. The Dominion commander's voice boomed across all channels, but this time it shook with fear. "What are you? How did you hide this level of technology from us?" Admiral Stone's hologram appeared on every ship and station in the sector. "We are humanity's guardians. For 400 years, we waited. We watched. We let you think we were primitive. And all that time, we prepared." On the Council's emergency broadcast, leaders from 100 worlds watched in awe. The simple metal ships they had mocked transformed before their eyes. Panels shifted, revealing weapon systems that defied their understanding of physics. The thick, clumsy-looking hulls rippled with energy that their best sensors couldn't even analyze. "Professor," Tom called out, "you might want to see this. The fleet is showing me its full capabilities. Those bulky radar dishes, they're actually timeline monitors. The fleet saw the Dominion coming hundreds of years ago." Reed's antennae twitched in shock. Time sensors, disguised as primitive radar. "But that's impossible." Tom smiled. "That's exactly what everyone was supposed to think. The fleet is full of impossible things, all hidden behind a mask of primitive design." The battle reached its peak. The Dominion launched their final weapon, a device they claimed could erase an entire sector of space from existence. The black sphere of energy grew between their ships, swallowing all light. "Should we retreat?" Reed asked nervously. Tom shook his head, still connected to the fleet's systems. "Watch those old radio antennas everyone thought were so funny." The long, simple-looking antennas on each human ship suddenly glowed with brilliant light. They weren't communication devices at all. They were reality anchors, technology so advanced it could prevent the fabric of space itself from being destroyed. The Dominion's sector killer weapon fired. The black sphere rushed toward the human fleet, but when it reached the network of glowing antennas, it simply stopped. Then, slowly, it began to collapse in on itself. "Impossible." The Dominion commander's voice cracked. "Those are primitive ships. We watched your species develop. You can't have this technology." Admiral Stone's voice was calm in reply. "You watched what we wanted you to watch. You saw what we wanted you to see. And now, after 400 years, you understand why." The supposedly primitive fleet moved as one. Every hidden weapon, every disguised system, every piece of impossible technology revealed itself at last. The trap that humanity had spent centuries preparing was finally complete. And across the galaxy, no one would ever underestimate human ingenuity again. The Dominion's main command ship hung broken in space, its perfect crystal surface now cracked and dull. Around it, the human fleet formed a sphere, their true power finally revealed for all to see. The battle was nearly over. "Surrender," Admiral Stone's voice echoed across all channels. "Your weapons cannot harm us. Your technology cannot match what we've hidden all these centuries. It's over." In the council chamber, representatives from every known species watched in silence. Council Leader White stood at the main window, his crystalline form reflecting the light of distant explosions as the last Dominion ships fell. "All this time," he said quietly, "we thought we were the advanced ones. We laughed at those ships, at their primitive design. We were such fools." On the flagship's bridge, Tom and Reed watched as the final moments played out. The nanite swarms had reduced most of the Dominion fleet to floating debris. Their unstoppable weapons had been stopped. Their advanced technology had been outmatched by systems disguised as ancient relics. "The Dominion commander is requesting to speak," Tom reported, his hand still connected to the ship's true control systems. "Should we accept?" Admiral Stone's hologram nodded. The dark, shifting form of the Dominion commander appeared on their screens. But now, instead of radiating power and menace, it seemed small and afraid. "How?" the commander asked, its voice no longer booming. "We watched your species for centuries. We saw your primitive rockets, your basic space stations. How did you hide all this?" "We saw you coming," Tom replied, speaking humanity's truth. 400 years ago, we detected your first scouts. We knew we couldn't fight you directly. Not then. So we split our development. Public technology developed slowly, making you think we were no threat. But in secret, we built this fleet. Every primitive feature designed to hide something far more powerful." The commander's form shifted nervously. "The other species we conquered, none of them fought to hide their true power. That was their mistake," Admiral Stone said. "They tried to match your technology directly. We chose a different path. Deception, patience, preparation." Across the galaxy, news of the victory spread. The supposedly unstoppable Dominion had been defeated by ships they had laughed at. The primitives they had planned to destroy had turned out to be anything but primitive. "What happens now?" Reed asked, his antennae moving thoughtfully. Tom smiled as new information flowed from the fleet's systems. "Now we rebuild. Remember those cargo holds everyone thought were so inefficient? They're actually matter replicators. We can rebuild every destroyed planet, restore every lost colony." The Dominion commander's image flickered. "And what of us?" "Surrender," Admiral Stone replied, "and you'll be treated fairly. That's the human way. We built this fleet to defend, not to conquer." One by one, the remaining Dominion ships powered down. Their great empire, built on destroying those they thought weaker, had been undone by their own arrogance. In the council chamber, Leader White called for attention. "Let this be a lesson to us all," he announced. "We laughed at these ships. We mocked their design. We called them primitive and worthless. Today, they saved every species in known space." Tom disconnected from the control panel, looking tired but proud. "Professor," he said to Reed, "thank you for believing in these ships when everyone else laughed. Thank you for staying to investigate when others left." Reed's 4 eyes blinked with emotion. "I just saw something that didn't make sense. You and your ancestors, you did the impossible." As the last Dominion ship surrendered, Admiral Stone's hologram addressed all channels one final time. "Let this victory stand as a reminder. Never judge by appearances. Never assume you know all there is to know. And never, ever underestimate humanity's ability to prepare for the future." The ancient fleet, its true power now known to all, began the work of rebuilding. What had started as a mysterious discovery had become the galaxy's salvation. And while no one was laughing anymore, they were all grateful that humanity had hidden its greatest achievements in plain sight, waiting for the moment they would be needed most. The long deception was over. The future was safe, and humanity's greatest fleet had finally fulfilled its purpose.